Daniel, you were the person who posed this question, which has made this whole thing possible.
I know, right?
and yeah, I called this round table, estimating the inestimable. I realized I was using the wrong word. It's inestimable. So anyway, the challenge that you presented in the Slack channel, which I thought was a really good one, was this question of how do you create project estimations when you're using Scrum in a situation where requirements are incomplete and things are being discovered as the project progresses. But do you want to elaborate on that at all? Kind of give us a bit of background on perhaps who the client is, why the requirements are incomplete, so that we're discussing this within the realities of the project that you're actually dealing with.
Yeah, of course. So, well, to start with, thanks for making this happen. I think this is very valuable for us, right? I think, and also this question is a very Scrum-centric question. Yeah. So we are used to, work in sprints with a very short timeline of, deliveries. As you know, the maximum allowed time for a sprint is 1 month. So my question is more like a client, and I'm not talking about a specific situation, but just a general thing that has happened. During my career, I see clients that they, of course, want to know the price of their project as a whole, right? They might have some idea of what they want, but as we continue to dig deeper in the project, we discover new stuff, and that is good. That is good because ultimately, excuse me?
It creates work for you, right?
Well, yeah, but it's supposed to create more value for the client, right? I guess my question is, if you estimate with whatever means you can the start of a project, how do you make sure to, if you encounter new stuff, how do you deal with the fact that you have to leave some other stuff behind to accommodate for that new stuff? Or how do you handle that at all? Maybe it's a question about sales and, just charging about for each sprint. But at the same time, if you tell a client, hey, I'm going to be charging whatever amount of dollars per sprint, he's not going to like it because, okay, how many sprints are we going to be needing, right? Yeah. And then again, you don't know, right?
Yeah. Do you know, we've published a few interesting things on estimating for Agile, and you should, if you search on the Digital Project Manager website and search for Alexa, Alexa. She has, I've had a couple of discussions with her. She works for an agency called Crema. They're based out of Kansas City. And yeah, I think because we're kind of talking about two different things here. One of them is about the sales process, and it's how we sell in an agile engagement where requirements are not well defined. And the model that they use is that they will sell in a team for a number of sprints. So it's okay. So you discuss the project and you say, hey, well, I think you use analogous estimating. So you say, hey, this project sounds like a project we did before, and that project took us 3 months or whatever it might be. So this is the kind of team we think we need for 3 months. But you charge it on a per sprint basis. And so you say, hey, well, the first, this is how much we think it's going to be, about 3 months. And we're going to have 6 sprints, but it could be 12 sprints that we require, or it could be much longer, it could be less. But you kind of agree a price per sprint. So that's kind of one way that we discussed in that podcast. But I know I actually recorded another podcast, which is coming out in the next few weeks. It's with a girl called Rebecca Gurmond. And the engagement model they were using was more on a fixed price. So they said, okay, the client had a fixed budget. And I think this is often the case that we deal with. The client has got a fixed budget. And in the case where the client has a fixed budget, it's more of a challenge around prioritization. And I think this is what Scrum is great for. It's helping us think, and you mentioned this right at the beginning, it's okay, we have a backlog of things and we need to prioritize things. One of the ways we prioritize and plan our sprints is based on, okay, delivering some kind of value at the end of it. And so thinking about, okay, well, what's going to deliver the most value? And if you've got a fixed budget, it's like, okay, well, you can afford this many sprints, but what value do we think we can deliver off the back of that? And really being really harsh about prioritization. But I'm curious though, for other people, for Leopoldo, for James, have you had experience? James, I can see you, so why don't we start with you?
Okay, sure.
Experience in this kind of scenario. How have you done? Because I think this really is a question around planning, project planning for agile engagements. So what does that look like for you?
Yeah, absolutely. So for us, we're a consulting company, and so we deal with both agile and the more traditional waterfall projects. And for the agile ones, it's really for us all about what we've agreed on with the client, what's in the statement of work. And if there's a specific deliverable that is mentioned in the statement of work, but that we're going to use agile principles to deliver, that we kind of plan those sprints out a bit in advance and see how much we can do in the time allotted, in the dollars allotted, quite frankly. And so using agile, but also trying to plan out ahead of time. That's more rare for us. Usually when we're doing an agile project with a client, they're hiring us for like a year, and we're going to do a whole bunch of stuff for them, and it's not always called out exactly what in the SOW. But if it was a company that had a specific thing in mind that they wanted from us, we would usually recommend it be waterfall. We would usually recommend that, hey, why don't we give you a 3 to 6 month project to do this, and we'll really do the due diligence to plan it out using like MS Project and all the tasks that we're going to need to do. And we kind of do all that up front before we agree to it. So it's hard it's kind of
that's part of some kind of discovery kind of project engagement.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So for me, I would kind of feel in a pickle if we had signed up for using Agile with a client and had specific deliverables and specific times in there.
They just don't work well
be like, well, maybe Agile isn't the best way to do it, right?
Yeah.
And
I think,
but if they prescribed it, go ahead, sorry.
Yeah, no, and I think that's a really good point, though. I think so much of there's an enthusiasm for Agile, and I think there's a particularly enthusiasm about the Scrum framework, which is a framework that doesn't really fit very well for agencies delivering and creating stuff for clients. And I think if you go in the Scrum Master training and you challenge the trainer, as I have done, about how do we apply Scrum within this context, they'll say, well, do you know what? It doesn't work very well. It's just a framework. And so, I think we can be realistic about that sometimes, and I think this is, and we talk about this in our Mastering Digital Project Management courses, we talk about how we can adopt an agile mindset and we can adopt an agile approach, but that doesn't mean that we have to follow Scrum. And I think there's lots of great things about an agile approach, which doesn't necessarily mean that you have to follow the Scrum framework to be more agile, which is all about, and I think what's great about agile is thinking about, okay, how is it that we're iterating on things, that we're getting users involved, we're delivering value, and thinking about an approach that allows us to do that, rather than saying, okay, well, we have to have Scrum, we have to have a backlog, we have to have this 2-week sprint thing, we have to have these Scrum ceremonies. when it's actually like, well, actually what's going to be most useful for the project and the client that you're working on.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, Leopoldo, can we see your face? Or can we hear you? I'm asking him to start his video, but so maybe he's just Leopoldo, are you there? There we go. Oh, no, maybe not.
You're on mute,
I guess
Leopoldo.
coming back to the waterfall methodology, so how do you deal with all of the unknowns
Yeah.
at the start? I mean,
That's a great question. So Scrum is great when there's lots of unknowns, right? Because you just take a stab and execute a sprint and then look at how you did, and you're learning along the way. When you get into like sprint 4 or 5, you're like discovering all the unknowns. But with waterfall, those really impact you if you don't know that what they are up front. So what we do is we do a lot of really deep requirements gathering and talking about the requirements with the client phases at the beginning. And before we lock the schedule and execute what we're going to do, we really try to get all the requirements out, plan everything out, maybe do some design composites, kind of show them what it's going to look like, how it's going to work. Maybe do some mock-ups and do some like even things that are functional mock-ups where if it's a web application, you can actually click around and see results, but that are all fake because you've mocked it all up. But at least they have a sense of the user flow. And so if you can do stuff like that up front, take a little bit of time to build that, but they're all mock-ups and examples of what you're going to build, and do that up front, that will really get the client on the same page with you. And then you can lock all the requirements down and have them like agree to them in writing, and then you just go do the waterfall project. And hopefully there's not a ton of changes after you do that.
and with those mock-ups that you mentioned, I mean, is that kind of like a small project before the big project?
Yeah, in a way it is. In a way, you're gonna talk to them about what they want. You're gonna go off, and the designers are gonna build design composite, in Photoshop or something like that. Or if you're working with developers, maybe they're going to make a really simple stub version of the application and then show that to the client after like a week or two, or maybe less even. And then you iterate on that, because usually there's gonna be little changes after they see it for the first time. But you iterate on that, and then you lock that down, and then you go build it for real. And so, yeah, I guess in a sense it is kind of a mini project at the beginning, but you plan that in along with the whole project.
So do you start already charging for that mini project, or somehow you're just hoping that you get the actual project and cover for it?
No, you definitely would want to, I think the only case you wouldn't charge for it is if you were in sort of a competition with another vendor. And I've been in those before. We do a lot of work with Microsoft, and so we were working on a project that we were trying to win, and Microsoft wanted us to build a mock-up version of it, and the other company was also doing the same thing, and then we only had 2 weeks. So for that, yeah, we didn't charge Microsoft for it, but we won it. And then we were able to have this like multi-year project as a result. So the benefit, the return on investment for us doing that was huge because we won it. But but I could see, like, if you're just starting out, yeah, you want to kind of upfront tell them, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to basically create this design composite for you, or this mock-up for you, and that's going to be part of the cost of the project. And as long as you're okay with that, the benefit is you'll know exactly what you're getting from us, in like 2 or 3 months. You'll see that really early. So
yeah, and I think one thing that I would add in all this is, like, obviously when we're working with a client engagement, they want to know how much something is going to cost. And kind of going back to your question, Daniel, they want to know, how much is this thing going to cost, and how long is it going to take? And I think one of the things you mentioned is, like, what do you do in this situation where requirements are incomplete? Well, I think the first thing that I would try and do is like ask that question, why is it the requirements are incomplete? So like, is there any way, like what requirements can you define? Like, can we set some requirements and estimate based on those requirements that we do know, and then any new requirements go into additional sprints or go into an additional estimate? But I think we need to ask that question, why it is that the requirements are incomplete, and then we can look at, okay, different ways of looking at estimating it. So we look at other projects we've done before, so like analogous estimating, or we say, okay, we're going to time box this. Like we're going to time box this to a 12-week project, and we're going to give you a team based on 12 weeks, and we're going to prioritize things. So the way that we can charge for it is we can charge by sprint, and we can say, hey, it's going to cost you for our team of however many people, 3 people, 4 people, we're going to charge you $7K per sprint. Or you can say, hey, we're not going to charge you per sprint, but we're going to charge you for time and materials. So that allows you a bit more flex in who you have in the team. And again, they only get charged for it. But I think what this kind of all comes back to, and I love what kind of James was talking about with, doing a discovery project up front, and kind of, we've got to get to a point, if we're trying to give a client a budget and a timeline for something, we have to create some kind of a plan. And I think this is where the whole agile Scrum thing gets confusing for us when we work in agencies, because client needs to know a number, and agile or Scrum would say, hey, well, numbers don't matter. Like you work out your velocity, and then you'll be able to get to then you can estimate after you've established the velocity. But for a client, that's not good enough. So we have to get to a point where we've got some decision-making data, and that we have to just define how much time we've got, how much budget we've got, what the requirements are. We have to decide on something, because that's going to give us some clarity to the project. That's going to help us define a resource plan, and give the client that decision-making data, whether or not the project is viable or not. Because I think one of the things to watch out for, if you do sell a client on a sprint-based approach where they pay per sprint, is that unless you're giving the client some idea of how many sprints it's going to be, like between 12 and 16 sprints or whatever it might be, they might not have the decision-making data to work out whether or not the value that you're going to generate off the back of this is going to be worth their while. So hopefully that's some food for thought.
I mean, and also, have you been in a place where you have an established team, and maybe you can account for a certain velocity, but from another project, but as same team? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think if you have the same team and you're doing points-based estimating, so you're doing planning poker or something, and you know that the team is at the point where they're estimating accurately, and you have a track record of how many points, like what their velocity is, then yeah, theoretically, you might get a more accurate estimate. However, I think we're very rare that we're comparing, oranges with oranges, and it's always slightly different. The client sandbox is always slightly different. The technology is always different. And as soon as you start working on something different, you run into kind of unknowns, and kind of accounting for those is what's difficult. So that's why I think if the client really does want to do agile, and they really bought into the idea that that's the way to go, and they're willing to pay on a per sprint basis, I think that's the most effective engagement model, in my view. I definitely steer away from fixed price and time and materials. The challenge with that is that it depends how often you're giving a client updates on the budget. So if you've got a big team, the budget can very quickly escalate from week to week, right? You could easily spend $5,000-$10,000, and that could be $10,000 that's over the client's budget. So if you're doing that time and materials engagement, there needs to be a system for keeping the client aware of how they're tracking with their budget.
Okay, I guess my last question for now is, I mean, for clients that are not into development, are not into technology, they are in the, I don't know, construction industry, but they somehow need a technical tool. They don't care about Scrum. They don't care about Waterfall either. So how do you? But of course, somehow Gantt charts feel more familiar, right? So how do you even try to sell them into Agile, or how do you try to do that transition?
Yeah, James, I'll hand that one over to you. I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, I would disagree with they don't like waterfall. I think they definitely like waterfall. You would probably plan out one of their projects just using typical waterfall methods, using something like MS Project, using the PMI set of materials, to do earned value management. They're huge on that. Understanding the project budget and what they're tracking to, estimate to completion, things like that. Those are project management grew out of the construction industry in the 1950s and also the military. So look back at the traditional methods of doing things when you talk about construction projects, and that's what they're used to. So yeah, I would start them off with just understanding what the budget is, understanding what all the tasks are, and building a Gantt chart in MS Project.
Yeah, and do you know what? Yeah, Daniel, this is something that I mentioned it before. We've got this course, and it's called Mastering Digital Project Management. And in the course, what we talk about is week one of the course. We talk about how we apply different methodologies to approaching projects. And what we talk about is there is no one size fits all. And actually, I think people who are dogmatic about a particular methodology being the only way to deliver a project are kind of missing the point, whereas actually we're just trying to find a way that works for our agency, that works for our team, that works for our client, that works for their tech savviness. And so for many clients, I don't think they're going to want to. I agree with James that actually a waterfall approach is fine for most clients that we work with, but they'll want to hear that you're being agile in some way, like that you're running things concurrently, that you're running design and you're running development concurrently, and you're doing QA as part of the development process. So it's just thinking how we package things to the client in such a way that it ticks their box. Oh yeah, we're using an agency that's applying an agile methodology, even though it might be actually you've planned it out in a waterfall way, and you do what James was talking about, a discovery phase. You define all the requirements, you get the things designed in a prototype, and then you build, and then you iterate on it. Then you kind of evaluate how successful it's been. But that whole process, that is an agile process. If there's an iteration after the first release. So I think it's just thinking through, fundamentally as project managers, we just want to make sure that we're covering our arse in terms of, we don't want to set up our teams or our agency to be overexposed in, selling the client this dream of agile and them thinking that somehow they'll get something at the end of it that's really cheap, because they often have this mindset that, if it's agile, it just means it's cheaper or more efficient. Actually, it can be more expensive. But people think that it must be cheaper. So it's definitely worth kind of, I think, throwing away that kind of textbook approach and just thinking, okay, what's going to work in this situation? And just do what makes sense rather than trying to follow a particular process like Scrum, and be open to the fact that waterfall might be right for your clients. Cool. Leopoldo, are you gonna share anything with us, or are you just gonna listen?
When I'm mute.
Nope. Nothing? Maybe his microphone's not working. Cool. Well, guys, thanks for joining today. I've enjoyed our discussion. Leopoldo!
Hi, sorry. I missed my microphone for a while.
No worries. Was there anything you wanted to add or ask?
Yes. So first, it's a pleasure to be here to exchange you. And yes, I work on a T department of a company, and I buy projects for my business. And so for the last months, I am used to go on a fixed price, to ask for a fixed price, and we prefer to pay for the planning phase with, we would say, business blueprint. And after that, we agree on a fixed price. It's with comfortable model. And for our business, it's more reliable. We can pay. We agree in pay more, but it's a fixed budget.
Yeah, and I think a fixed price I think can totally work. Obviously, yeah, the thing with when you're paying a fixed price is that the person who's doing the work obviously needs to add in their contingency budget and their risk budget, and they need to have a really clear understanding of the requirements. And I think it comes down to understanding what needs to be done and how far out you can plan. And we talked about a planning horizon, like how far ahead can you see really clearly so that you can define what the project actually is, what their outputs are. And I think that's really clear. If you've got a good planning horizon, then you're able to do fixed price engagements, and you can kind of account for the risks that there are. But yeah, that can work too. Awesome. Cool, guys. Well, thanks for joining. This has been fun, and I hope we'll do it again soon.
Thanks a lot.
Take care, guys. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.